Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Whimsy Anderson. I'm a naturopathic doctor, and I'm also a medical anthropologist. And I have written on the subject of eugenics, racism, and sexism. My main research has been on working in integration, how we can develop integration programs to promote unity and strength within the Israeli government, etc. I'm an Israeli American, so what I'm presenting here is based on a desire to help support Israel, make it a happier country for everybody. And so my work is based on looking at things as a medical anthropologist and treating the condition. So we look at the cause, and then we try to remove that cause so that the problem never happens again. And so when we look at a situation like October 7th, we have very obvious causes, Hamas being the government that was in charge of Gaza. They had been training for months. They had intended to attack Israel. They attacked Israel. So it's pretty straightforward. The money came from Qatar. The money came from Iran. There are the obvious factors. But when the question becomes, is there anything that Israel could have done differently? How was our security lapsed? How did we lapse in our security? What lessons can we learn from the massacre that took place on October 7th? How can we turn things around so that we are safer, so that the people around us don't desire us harm? There are many ways we can treat this as a medical anthropologist. But today I decided to focus on the phenomenon of gender bias, or in common vernacular, sexism within the IDF. Did sexism within the IDF play any factor at all in security and intel problems that were taking place prior to the massacre? That was the focus. So we're, say you've got a patient that's sick and you decide you're going to run some labs and try to determine why the patient doesn't feel good or why the patient's vitals are crashing. So you look at causes. So that's kind of how a medical anthropologist would be operating in a situation like this. I am just trying, without any emotion attached, how can we as Israelis make our country a better place? How can we all come together, kumbaya, have those kosher s'mores, everybody's happy, everybody's safe. And there are things that we can do as Israelis, as Jewish people, non-Jewish people, as ultra-Orthodox, Haredi, or the more secular. But one thing is for certain, we're all Israelis. We love our country. We want our country to be a safe place for everybody. We want the rest of the world to be able to like us and to be able to visit and see what a great country we have. We want to be able to come back. I'll be moving back. I was gone for several years, but I'll be moving back to Israel probably within a year. Still debating which city. I love Tel Aviv. My heart is in Jerusalem. What can a girl do? All right, let's talk about the data. So this is published. I'll go ahead and I'll give a link in this discussion so that all of you can enjoy it. This is my entertainment channel, and I decided to put this here to get the most clicks, quite frankly. But I'm a bit of a thespian. Yes, I do a little performance art entertainment tarot reading over here. But so it's unusual for me as the lecturer or the person talking on this subject to put it on this channel. I'll go ahead and put it on my other professional channel also. All right, let's take a look at what the data shows. Did sexism play a factor in the breach that took place in our security October 7th? And the data would suggest it did. Here we have a graph This is female warnings that were escalated 40% less often than we saw when men reported the same data. The women that were at the wall, the women that were in Nahal Oz, that were part of our border security, had been collecting data showing that Hamas was going to attack for about 9 months prior to the attack. And what the research shows is that when intel was collected and when it was given to IDF brass, their supervisors, female data was discarded 40% more than their male counterparts, even when the data was the same. And so when we look at this gap, we can view this gap as a security gap that very likely could have played a part in an intelligence breach. Because the raw data is that female reporting, so their judgment was questioned more often. In plainer words, there was a bias against female IDF soldiers reporting the same intelligence. And so we have to ask ourselves, where does the bias come from? Why are women not being respected when they give intel in IDF? Is this lack of respect costing us our security? And the answer is, it's costing us security. Where is it coming from, and how can we put a stop to it? The Talmud, if you're looking at ultra-Orthodox Judaism and Orthodox Judaism, the Talmud certainly makes reference to the fact that women cannot be, their judgment is to be questioned. So if you have a culture, a growing culture of orthodoxy that believes that a woman's judgment cannot be trusted, or it's worth half that of a man, does that mean that half the intel winds up being tossed in the trash? Well, it would be obvious from anyone looking at the data that that's precisely what happened. So you have the same data, but if it's presented to you by a female, it's nearly twice as likely to be thrown in the trash. And so what can we do to change cultural norms and to help people understand that when the Talmud was written thousands of years ago, only 10% of the population could read? The scribes, the intellectuals, and the Pharisees, and they had to represent the other 90%. And it was far less than that if you were female, because you were having children, you had no birth control, there was no opportunities for this type of education for most women. And so it was not a world that people in the first century could have conceived of, that we're now in the 21st century. 60% of college graduates are women. And we're living in a very different world. And because we're living in a different world, I think we have to look at the Talmud and these cultural ideas about women and testimony within their cultural context. They were talking about a population that was illiterate and simply didn't have an opportunity to have the same intellectual and educational background as the men, because that was not the economy of the time. But the economy has changed, and the literacy rates have changed. And so what we have is these cultural ideas coming from all kinds of places, like the Talmud, maybe from the Quran and other religious texts. But the point is that the gender bias is deeply rooted in the culture, and it has to be addressed. It's hurting people, and it's getting people killed. So sexism as a national security threat, the idea that systemic gender bias in the IDF command structure contributed to the intelligence failures of October 7th. And so what was going on is that from January until September of 2023, the all-female surveillance units at the Gaza fence collected visual evidence that Hamas was preparing an attack that would occur on the 7th of October. The women documented repeated mock raids on full-scale replicas of Israeli observation posts, hostage-taking drills using dummies dressed in IDF uniforms, training with explosive drones and paragliders in plain sight during daylight hours, and the sudden appearance of trucks and heavy equipment near the border that had never been seen before. So this unit, which was called the Tatzpitaniyot, my Hebrew is terrible, I know, dual citizen, I apologize. Tatzpitaniyot, filed formal reports, escalated them through official channels, and in many cases begged for verification patrols or drone overflights. The response they received from male commanders were consistent and chilling. Stop being so dramatic. Go drink some water and calm down. These girls are imagining things again. Not women, girls. So they were also, it would be like, hey, boy. So the language was also denigrating. They were not women. They were not full adults. They were called girls, girls that were imagining things. These were well-trained IDF soldiers reporting intel, meeting up against discrimination, which has no place in the IDF, when a fellow soldier is delivering vital intel. You're seeing terrorist in every shadow. If you send one more farmer with a pitchfork message, you're on potato peeling duty. You're acting hysterical. This is kindergarten channel. So when women become hysterical, when the data is not coming out, which is a normal response when you know that a major terrorist attack is going to come and kill thousands of people, the natural response would be to become heightened emotionally, right? But the hysteria became further proof to the people in charge that they were dealing with little girls and kindergartners who were acting hysterical. In at least 2 documented instances, female commanders who supported their soldiers and tried to push for warnings higher were threatened with formal discipline reports for insubordination and wasting senior officers' time. The result was self-censorship. As one survivor later testified, after the 3rd or 4th time you're laughed at or threatened, you start to doubt your own eyes. So they became gaslit. So it wasn't just that the intel was tossed in the trash by our border security based on gender alone, but they were also being gaslit and they were being psychologically abused. So they were being sexually harassed, psychologically abused and manipulated. Their intel was being discarded based on gender alone. We learned it was safer to stay quiet. That silence forced by contempt and reprisal was the final gate Hamas walked through on October 7th. The base was left unarmed, unalerted, and unprepared, and 15 young women were murdered at their screens while it unfolded, silenced. You know, there's this idea in Judaism which is called kol isha, a woman is to remain silent. And that is precisely what happened here. They were silenced. They were silenced and they were murdered at their screens. Imagine sitting there for 9 months watching Hamas preparing to come and attack your country, screaming for 9 months, and eventually you have to scream in your pillow while being sexually harassed and gaslit by your supervisors. 15 are dead, 7 were dragged into hell. Empirical findings from Nahal Oz are as follows. 70% of sexual harassment complaints at Nahal Oz were effectively buried. So there was sexual harassment and abuse that was taking place and reported a full year prior to the attacks. Trivialized, debased, discarded, hypersexualized, dismissed. That's a national security threat. Debased, discarded, trivialized, dismissed, hypersexualized, affecting the mental health and the ability of that soldier to do their job effectively. That's a security risk. Female warnings escalated 40% less often, even with identical intel. That's a gap in intel, and that gap is a potential for a security breach. More than 1 in 4 female draftees now refuse to serve at Nahal Oz because they don't feel that they would be protected and because the sexual harassment and abuse was so intense. Never mind what happened on October 7th. Public attitudes about Nahal Oz, about the women who perished. You can see the red there, 80% were considered hysterical kindergartners prior to the attacks. That ended dramatically after October 7th. And they died as national heroes. So in death, they were national heroes, but in life, they were temperamental children. So let's take a look at cause and effect pathway that I would be asked to perform if I had been commissioned to do this study, but I did it on my own. We're going to look at cause and effect now, something a medical anthropologist likes to look at. So the causal basis was we begin from a place of harassment, discrimination. These escalated into reprisal and threats. If you don't stop this reporting, there will be consequences. This led to suppression of intel, right? I'm not going to report because there will be consequences if I report something that he does not find pleasing, right? Now it's become an emotional thing. This is not science. This is not intel. This is not data. This is just a bunch of emotionalism. This leads to chronic stress on the part of the IDF soldier. It also causes the IDF soldier to self-censor, which is extremely dangerous to intel. Rabbinical and cultural bias most definitely plays a part, and for that reason, we have to overhaul the rabbinut's prejudices. We have to call them out on it. And there needs to be an internal change that happens within that community because the cultural bias is spilling over into our security and our intelligence in dangerous ways. It caused a complete intelligence blind spots. That blind spot became operational complacency. It led to no alerts, no weapons, no drills. And it allowed Hamas execute the exact scenario the women had described 9 months earlier. 9 months earlier, they had reported that was what was going to happen. 15 murdered, 17 abducted, 250 other hostages, and 1,200 Israelis are dead. 75,000 in Gaza. About 40,000 of those military combatants, give or take, 40 to 50K were military combatants. Excuse me. Had to turn my phone off. Okay. So that was the causal pathway. Sexism was not a contributing factor. Instead, we can say it was a necessary condition for the failure. That the failure would not have happened, or that we would not have had likely a 40% dismissal of intelligence if everybody there had been a man. So that leads us to one of two choices. Either women will no longer be allowed to serve in those units, or there needs to be a complete overhaul and examination of gender bias within the IDF and sexual harassment and abuse. So let's go ahead also and let's start looking at how that abuse is being fostered by the media. So here's just a couple of examples of some of the posts that happen. Dozens of these posts appear every day. You can see here these sexy images of female IDF soldiers, so that you have this hypersexualization this desire that, isn't it great? Our soldiers are so attractive, they're so sexy, etc. So what happens is you have this hypersexualization. Here's an article I wrote also about that, which is you can check out also from my blog, which is about the hypersexualization of soldiers. Sorry, that's not coming up quite like I had hoped. But you have Israeli army, they put up a lot of posts showing semi-nude or sexually provocative images of female IDF soldiers. We also see that there's a rise in the sexual abuse of female soldiers, more reports that have not been dealt with. In Nahal Oz, there were a number of sexual abuse and harassment reports, but unfortunately, nothing came of it, and the reports were tossed in the trash. Nothing the women say is taken serious. Here again, Israeli army posting hypersexualized or sexy images of IDF soldiers, as if this is cute, as if this is funny, as if female soldiers in the IDF want to be treated like prostitutes, want to be treated like whores and sex pinups. This is not an image that is helping with intelligence in the IDF. It isn't helping when she reports that there's a sniper or when she reports unusual activity at the border. Instead, you're going to see her as a sex object, a dancing woman on a table, because the powers that be think that this is how female IDF soldiers need to be represented. And if we think that it is not bleeding into the general conversation, if we think that it is not impacting gender bias in the IDF, then we haven't seen the data. Sexism is a national security threat. Sexism is a national security threat. Intel gaps that exist because of gender are a national security threat. So what can we do about it? Immediate and enforceable actions. And furthermore, I'll take it a step further. I think we need hearings in the Knesset. And I think that those members of the IDF that were tossing trash in Nahal Oz, the intelligence into Nahal Oz, I think they and their the people above them need a serious inquiry into gender discrimination in the IDF and its impacts on national security. And furthermore, more than that, we need to be examining other bases, because if this is happening at Nahal Oz, it could be happening at other locations. And that means other attacks could be planned that we are missing because of gender bias in collection of intel. Okay, that's my presentation. I hope I did some good. I hope I helped my fellow Israeli. I hope I helped the female soldiers of the IDF be able to do their jobs effectively. And I want to thank them for their service. We honor them and we respect them for their dedication and their service to the country, along with all of the people who serve with the IDF. Thank you so much for watching this very casual, brief presentation. And bless you all. Have a happy Hanukkah if you celebrate it. And God bless the great state of Israel. Thank you all for your time. Be well.